controversy follows everywhere he's been.
Russians don't take a dump, son, without a plan.
What in the wide, wide world of sports is going on here?
The CFB on OSG with your host, the Online Sports Guys.
As always, we thank Tommy Palmer for the introduction as we begin another episode of the Review Podcast. The OSG Sports team talking everything college football, the news, notes, and nuggets from a week that has been. And this week, it is me, Brother Phil, along with Brother Wilkie. Say hi, Brother Wilkie.
Hello, folks.
Don't forget, we are on social media, of course, because, well, everybody is. You can find me at OSG Phil. You can find Brother Wilkie at jwilkerson16. John just messaged in. Weird. John is away working a Atlanta United soccer match and trying to get in on the call, but we're having a little technical difficulties, so the two of us are going to proceed. A lot to talk about this week. Last week's show was kind of focused on the unofficial kickoff to the college football season, otherwise known as Media Days. Most of the Power 5 schools holding their events. I just lost Brother Wilkie too. That's not good. He's back. I lost you there for a second.
Hey, modern technology.
Yes. Was doing the setup into leading into the Media Days conversation. Everybody had theirs, the SEC, the Big Ten, the Big 12. The Pac-12 had their Media Day singular. Probably
That's this week. Pac-12
Yes.
is this week in Hollywood.
Probably the biggest thing to come out of the usually somewhat non-controversial event was Jim Harbaugh.
What a shock.
Yeah. Coach Harbaugh made quite a few headlines over the course of the week on a variety of subjects. The one that caught a few people's eyes was a couple of comments he made about former Ohio State coach and probably soon to be USC coach, but that's another conversation for another day, Urban Meyer. With Harbaugh, after being asked about competing against Meyer, that controversy has followed Urban Meyer everywhere he's been.
On a podcast with The Athletic, Harbaugh said, quote, Urban Meyer's had a winning record, really phenomenal record everywhere he's been, but also controversy follows everywhere he's been, close quote. Meyer retired at the end of last season. He went 4-0 against Harbaugh, a record Harbaugh noted in the podcast. He said, quote, you welcome the accountability, close quote.
Not a crazy comment. Oh, hey, John's back. Hi, John.
Nothing like being in Wi-Fi purgatory.
Yes. I'll kind of lead you into where we are right now. We're talking about Media Days, the wrap-up, and we're talking about Jim Harbaugh, everybody's favorite. You're frozen up again. That's an even better look than the last time you froze up.
It's that darn Wi-Fi at Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
It is.
What was interesting to me about Jim Harbaugh is he shows up dressed with his jacket and tie and his suit on, and he had to wear his obligatory Michigan hat with it.
Yes. And strangely enough, he called the heat he caught for calling Urban Meyer, what did he say? That controversy has followed Urban Meyer everywhere he's been. Was that heat deserved, or because to me at least he wasn't saying anything that was untrue or incorrect?
I don't think it was anything new. I don't think it was a bombshell. It was all things that have been written about are very well documented.
Well, I think it's Jim Harbaugh. He's commenting on Urban Meyer, and it was taking a direct shot at him. And I don't think he ever beat Urban Meyer when he was at Ohio State.
Well, he didn't.
So it's basically he's out of the league now, but there's still some issues there with Jim Harbaugh with Urban Meyer. I think I think you want to dig into him a little bit after the way things went down at Ohio State, and now that he's in our business.
For now.
Well, wouldn't it be interesting to see Urban interview Jim Harbaugh on their studio show?
Oh, that would be awesome.
Oh goodness! But would he allow himself to be a guest on the Urban Meyer podcast and talk about? Let's see, what would the appropriate topic be? Showing respect for fellow coaches.
I thought, and I thought isn't the Urban podcast something about leadership or something having to do with that weird class that you taught?
Yes, leadership.
But alas, it was not the only thing we heard of from Coach Harbaugh over the course of the week. He also got a lot of heat for making a statement saying that he believes players citing mental health issues as the reason to gain eligibility in the transfer process could lead to players kind of exaggerating or not being totally honest before entering John's favorite subject,
Portaling.
Transfer portal.
Scotty, beam me up.
Well, for me, I look at it this way. You're trying to define something that at times is undefinable.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
if you want to go home, I know you want to go home. If there's something attached to it, if it's a family matter, I assume that someone who's 18 to 22 years old is going to be open and honest about it. If that's the reason that you're wanting to portal. So for me, saying something like that, that's a slippery slope because you don't want to put trust in your student athletes at that point. You're just sitting there and you're saying that individual is doing it for a selfish reason and not for a reason that could naturally be a genuine reason that you would want to go do something like that. So for me, for a coach to drop that kind of a line, that's pretty dangerous.
The comment, it got some immediate response. And I'm reading from a story on CBSSports.com where the mother of one of Harbaugh's former players who tried to transfer to Cincinnati and got his waiver denied spoke of suffering from depression, and because he never really brought it up at Michigan, the NCAA denied the waiver because they claimed that they were not aware such an issue existed.
If you're an 18 to 22-year-old male, and honestly, if you're older than that, you're not going to want to bring this stuff up publicly just because that's not how you're wired, or that's not how you're brought up. We're not brought up, and I think that this is disappointing that this is the case, that we're not brought up to express our feelings, to sit there and open up to others and sit there and say, okay, here's what's going on in my life. You're supposed to be an athlete. You're supposed to just buck it up and be out there and be a man and all this kind of stuff, where I think that if we took time to break down those mores and understand people for who they are, then you wouldn't have this kind of short-sightedness in a sound.
Well, and he later walked it back a little bit.
Of course he did.
Talking more about that, he was talking more specifically about allowing players one time and one time only to transfer. But at that point, the cat's kind of out of the bag. And Wilkie, was he out of line there too? The former player's mom really, really jumped him for the comment and kind of called him out on the double standard. Is this a legitimate argument debate here, or grasping a little bit at straws?
I think it's a little bit of both. But at the same time, I think, this is where Jim Harbaugh needs to have some kind of filter. But I think right now he's feeling pretty good about himself. He kind of feels like his team is, with Urban Meyer leaving Ohio State, that Michigan now is the front runner and dictates the terms in the Big Ten right now. And I think we saw some of that confidence and some of that swagger at Big Ten Media Days, where, he feels Michigan is the Michigan of old now. And all the hurdles that have been in front of him as far as things he has not been able to accomplish at Michigan have been kind of cleared now. And this is his conference to win. He does return some really good talent, including Shea Patterson. But I think he's got some swagger now, and those hurdles have cleared. And it was a little disappointing though, because I think he needs to have some kind of filter about things like this, and unfortunately he didn't. Now I've got to compliment a couple of teams at Big Ten Media Days. I got to compliment Nebraska and Purdue, because they brought their two big stars to Media Day. And there seems to be a trend in these events now where some of the stars are not showing up or not being invited, or whatever to put in front of the media. And of course, Adrian Martinez came for Nebraska, and Rondell Moore, who's an outstanding talent for Purdue, he showed up. They're both sophomores. So I got to tip my hat to Jeff Brom at Purdue and Scott Frost at Nebraska to put their guys in the spotlight like that.
Well, there were a couple others. I know Alabama, I believe, brought Tua, and Jake Fromm showed up for Georgia. So they weren't totally bereft of stars when it comes to that level. I believe Jalen Hurts may have showed up for Oklahoma at Big 12 days as well. You were at ACC Media Days this week. Anything really kind of jump off the page to you?
It was extremely boring in Charlotte. Let's put it this way. Day one, there was some buzz there with Clemson being in the building, and with all the pomp and circumstance about the ACC network launching in a month, and all the intrigue with that and what's going on, and all the stars and personalities were in Charlotte for the event to promote the ACC network. And then the next day, when the Coastal Division showed up, it was completely dead.
Wow.
It was, it seemed like half the media members had cleared out. It was just, let's get these guys, let's start the assembly line, get it over with, break down, and head home. There was just very little buzz at that event, and it led me to think: have these media days, especially in football, kind of gone past their prime? With all this networks taking over the conferences, and what's really the use of going to these events when the media rights have been swallowed up by these large companies? ESPN with the SEC and ACC, Fox has the Big Ten network, the Big 12 is probably the only one, because Pac-12 is kind of out in the middle of out west, where only a few people care about college football. And then you've got your Pac-12 network that's struggling. But the Big 12 is the only one I can think of that still kind of has that charm of everybody getting together and accessibility to coaches and players. I wasn't in Arlington for that, but the footage that I saw there was still that informality between the media and the coaches, albeit at a limited time. So I'm just wondering if these are more the ACC, SEC, and Big Ten football media days are more TV shows that serve a purpose to promote their product rather than anything we got out of it.
John, would you agree with that? I mean,
No, I'm down. I'm down with that completely. I think it's turned into the made-for-TV event that it is, and it's a made-for-TV event for the people who own the TV. And it is now one of those elements where you're looking at it and going, how much am I going to get out of this? Well, the answer to that is going to be dictated by your rights holders, and not necessarily by all of your local news, because the local news guys are going to come and they're going to get something akin to the scraps at the table.
And breadcrumbs.
Yeah, breadcrumbs and scraps, and it's just going to be kind of painful from now on if you're not a rights holder.
Yeah, I think now the SEC, to me, what my observation from that was that the local TV still show up for that one, albeit not in the great numbers that there used to be. The ACC, I hardly saw any local TV other than perhaps the Raleigh area. Some of the Charlotte stations showed up, but it was main. I didn't even see. Usually the team play-by-play voices, radio play-by-play voices are there. The only one that was there was Don Munson from Clemson, a friend of the show. And so to me, that's how much that event has kind of gone by the wayside. So what I observed from Big 12 is that local stations there still show up in Arlington, from Austin to Oklahoma City to Topeka. But probably SEC. I don't know about Big 10 because that's in Chicago, and I'm sure some of the local stations show up there. But to me, it was just really a stark contrast to what it was, let's say, 10 years ago to what it is now.
I think in the era of social media where you have kind of unfiltered access to a lot of the kids, and in the era where really, like we talked about, the big networks kind of dominate and control everything, there is nothing to be gained out of it. Never mind for the people who are covering it, but for the fans. I mean, there's nothing that you're going to get out of that you haven't already at least gotten some sort of tease about over the course of the off season.
Autographs.
Yeah. And at the same time, practice is getting ready to start within the next 2 weeks for just about everybody. So you're going to see practice stuff and storylines coming out of practice almost instantaneously.
I mean, listen, we talking about practice. Not a game. We talking about practice.
So it doesn't really provide or offer anything other than just kind of spoon feeding the assembled media masses. And for most people, unfortunately, even though we come from an era where it was important, for most people in the modern era, or in the most recent generation, it's not so important anymore.
Well, what technology are we using right now for our podcast? Mm-hmm. We're using the Skype technology. Okay, that wasn't around 10 years ago. So that technology could be used as far as getting your storylines and your interviews and so forth. That might be another avenue to explore as we go forward in all this. Maybe it is a mass video conferencing, and it turns into that. Now, it doesn't help the TV side, but in the radio and print side, it helps. So I just think probably within 10 years, that's what we're going to see. There may be some kind of presence with your conference TV partner at some venue somewhere. But I just see I can see in 5 to 10 years these events for football and for even for men's basketball being phased out.
It's a relic from a bygone era. Guys, why don't we go ahead and take that as our cue to kind of wrap up the first block here on the OSG Review Show, where we're talking college football, and it would be derelict in my duty if I didn't go through the promotional part of it now.
Cut the promo, brother.
Woo!
But to be the man, you gotta beat the man, and I'm saying, woo!
Tell him, Niche boy.
All right, so
if you're watching this
go
here,
for it. I want to see how you do it. I want to see what you miss.
If you're watching us here on video, then obviously you have found our YouTube channel at OSG Sports. And as an added bonus, you can find us at the same handle on both Twitter and on Facebook at OSG Sports. He is OSG Nelson, Brother John Nelson. He is Jay Wilkerson 16, Brother John Wilkerson. I am OSG Phil. We are the online sports guys. And believe it or not, kids, we have our own phone app too.
Yes, we do.
You can find it at both the Google Play and at the Apple Store. Download it. It's free. And it gives you access to all of our programming, not just the college football. It gives you access to our lacrosse shows, our soccer shows, occasionally content from our friends up in Canada at barnburner.ca.
Wrestling. Yeah.
All kinds of good stuff. More sports stuff than you can handle in one particular reading. With all that being said, when we come back in the second block, we've got news, notes, nuggets, and things left unsaid, including some conversation about naming rights for Rutgers Stadium.
Shit.
Being able to buy alcohol at Kansas, And the attorney who helped kind of pioneer or get the transfer portal moving at full speed is now changing teams. All that and more when we come back on the review. We are the OSG Sports teams. You are listening and watching on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network.
Yeah, I'd give a rat's ass about Twitter.
Everybody buckle up. Buckle up.
Let's go.
Buckle up.
Can we go to the store? Mom, can we get some ice cream?
Everybody, buckle up.
A lot goes on in the car, but you're in control. So only move when you hear the click that says they're buckled in. Never give up until they buckle up. Learn more at safercar.gov/kidsbuckleup. A message from the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration and the Ad Council.
Soccer Down Here is sponsored by Apolinski and Associates, LLC, personal injury lawyers with over 30 years of experience. Call Steve Apolinski at 518-350-4231 or email him at steve@aa-legal.com if you need help with a wrongful death or serious injury matter. Steve Apolinski is rated one of the top 100 trial attorneys in Georgia, recognized as Legal Elite by Georgia Trend magazine for being one of the most effective lawyers in Georgia.
Welcome back to The Dog Show. Up next, we have Satchmo. Satchmo is a member of the Shelter Pet Group.
That's right, a group known especially for their couch-snuggling, ball-chasing, face-licking, and, of course, companionship. Now, let's see him in action.
Look how he makes eye contact with his person.
That's actually known as the treat stare.
How intuitive, and now he appears to be excitedly turning in circles.
Ah, the happy dance so common with this group.
But really, the best way to know an amazing shelter pet like Satchmo is to meet one.
Visit theshelterpetproject.org today. Adopt.
Brought to you by Maddie's Fund, the Humane Society of the United States, and the Ad Council.
If you want to scale a mountain, buy boots. If you want to turn your crush into something more, say hi. At Country Financial, we know protecting the things you love and preparing for tomorrow start with simple steps. So we help you take small steps today with insurance and financial services that can have a big impact on your family's future.
For all your home, auto, and life insurance needs, call Jason Wright at 678-568-6871.
Welcome back to the second block of the review. We are the OSG, the online sports guys, and this is our college football podcast / video podcast. And we're talking college football. If you listen to the first block, you heard us talk, kind of summarize and wrap up some of the highlights and newsworthiness of football media days. And before we move on to other subjects, Brother Wilkie, I believe you had a couple things you wanted to hit on here, and as we summarize and wrap up and move on to the practice season.
I mean, listen, we talking about practice, not a game. We talking about practice.
Well, we had some trash talking, I guess you'd say, between Alabama and Clemson during this during the each conference media days. Dylan Moses, the Alabama linebacker, basically saying that Georgia was a better team than Clemson was. And John Simpson, the offensive guard for Clemson, who's a pretty good dude, by the way.
Team dressed up as Trevor Lawrence.
Exactly. Basically just saying Alabama wasn't a good team. That Notre Dame was better than Alabama in the semifinals. So I think we've got some kind of pot stirred between those two teams, and would make it quite interesting when they should they meet for the fourth time in the college football championship game. The other thing from out of SECs that got to me was how Tua Tagovailoa is definitely on a mission to get another national championship. That was pretty telling to me. Now we go on to Big 12, and Kansas State could sneakily be very good this year. And the reason why I bring that up is Chris Kleiman, the new head coach there. I forget which player it was that was at K-State, and it'll come to me probably when their podcast is over, basically talking about the open door policy that Chris Kleiman has, and that he talked about going up to the fourth floor you basically didn't really acknowledge Bill Snyder or never really said anything to him. It was just kind of that aura of him and just not being approachable, and how Kleiman has totally changed that. And I think you're going to see a much looser and freer Kansas State team this coming season. And while there's some holes there, when you watch those interviews and with Kleiman and with their players, you kind of get the feeling that a dark cloud, well, I don't want to say a dark cloud, but some kind of atmospheric change has happened in Manhattan for the better. And I'm not saying they're going to win the Big 12, but I think, they might be that team that sneaks up on everyone. The other takeaway from Big 12 is Les Miles realizing what kind of team he has in Lawrence and putting a lipstick on a pig. Let's put it that way. But he did flash his national championship ring at LSU, so he has that going for him. And then at the American media days, the fact that they have no plans of expanding, and they want to keep the Power Six narrative going on, which I think I think it's a good thing. I think they have every right to show off that banner of a Power Six. It's a good football league. So some good things. Those are some takeaways I got from the media days. And talking season was in full bore.
I think you're right about Chris Kleiman. I think at the end of this season, and possibly over the next couple of seasons, he's going to go down as one of the best hires in the last couple of years at the Power 5 level. I think he's a fantastic coach. Just look at his track record in South Dakota.
North Dakota State.
Or North Dakota State, my bad. I almost said South Dakota State, my mistake.
Well, there was this talk about not being able to get quarterbacks into that part of the country. And, of course, he was the coach of Carson Wentz. And so if he can get to Fargo, I don't see any reason why some really good quarterbacks can, especially in the offense that they run, because it's a pretty attractive offense for the youngsters. Skylar Thompson was the player that referred to the new atmosphere at the facility there in Manhattan, Kansas. Look for. I think you're going to see a much looser and freer K-State team in the 2019 season.
I think you're right. And by the way, I'll add 2 cents here on the American Athletic Conference as well. I think they're making a smart move. Losing UConn really doesn't hurt them, as UConn was not really a player in terms of the depth they brought to the conference.
Right.
And the good teams there are the good teams there and remain the good teams there, and doesn't inhibit them growing or making it someday the Power Six. We'll see how that goes. I want to transition into some of the news and notes of the week. And you talked about Les Miles. And one of the things that Lester is going to be able to bring to the fans this year, courtesy of his athletic administration, is alcohol for the fans at Memorial Stadium.
Thank you very much. Have a great day.
Now, mind you, it might be something if you're sitting in the stands watching the Jayhawks play football, you may need a pretty stiff drink.
You stole my line.
Yes, I try. Beer and alcohol sales are heading to the general seating areas. Kansas has struggled to get anybody into the ball yard for a game because, quite honestly, they've been the worst team in Division I for about the last decade. Magic trick, maybe, maybe not. Is that something, if you're a Kansas supporter, would that get you into a game to go see the football team play?
Depends on what beer and alcohol is being sold. If it's an Anheuser-Busch product or something along those lines, I might be inclined to watch it on TV. But if they got a nice little beer garden at Memorial Stadium in Lawrence, or serving some, they get a full bar somewhere, I might be willing to go and spend a little extra at KU. Again, if you're a Jayhawk fan, as Phil noted, you're going to need a couple of shots just to get through it. Especially, I don't have their schedule in front of me. I don't see what their home schedule is, but I'm sure there's some teams there that could put a pounding on the Hawks. So, to me, it all depends on what's being served there.
Changing gears just a little bit, and I kind of wish Brother John was back for this segment because I want to talk briefly about the transfer portal, and in specifics, the attorney who has helped the majority of the players get their waivers accepted by the NCAA, and that's Thomas Mars. It was announced this week that Mars is going to be going from battling the NCAA to get players eligible. He's joining the NCAA and will be part of their new complex case unit.
What was that again?
Complex case unit. Believe it or not. Not the special victims unit, the complex case unit.
Another bureaucracy. I love it.
Yes. The unit is supposedly being formed to help kind of give the NCAA an outlet to look into a lot of the dirty laundry and allegations currently floating around against some of the college basketball programs right now when it comes to recruiting and the involvement in the sneaker companies, which should be an interesting topic and probably a really good podcast subject for somebody to delve into at some point in time as well, hint, hint. But interesting to see that Mars, who is generally acknowledged as being the penultimate expert on the transfer portal, is kind of switching sides.
Is he getting paid better?
I don't know how well, I guess that's debatable. I don't really know. Good question, though. Want to give a brief shout out as well for former Penn State linebacker, former ABC game analyst, former Super Bowl champ and Oakland Raider Matt Millen, who is returning from heart transplant surgery and will be back in the broadcast booth this college football season.
He was up in the booth for Penn State's spring game for Big Ten Network, and he looked great, sounded great, and he was one of the he was always like. I remember he was always the one that people thought would replace Madden whenever he decided to leave. And of course, he went on to the Detroit Lions to be their president of football operations, general manager, insert your title here. And all he did was draft wide receivers. And it didn't really work out so good for him. But I'm really happy to see that he's doing well, that they had a match for his heart. And he's doing good, and he's going to be back in the booth. And we need enthusiastic guys like him who love football, who love the trenches, and a great storyteller, I'm sure. But I'm looking forward to hearing him do games this year.
Absolutely. And last thing here before we kind of wrap things up here on the review, Rutgers announced they've got a new name for their football stadium. It's going to be called SHI Stadium. And that's a change from highpoint.com Stadium, which is a whole awkward title unto itself. But considering the struggles of the Rutgers football team over the past few years, what kind of jokes come to mind when you hear that one?
Well, depending on the kind of year they have, and I think we kind of know what kind of year they're going to have. A certain letter toward the bottom of the alphabet might be inserted there as the appropriate naming rights for the for the Rutgers SHI International Corps. Now, I mean, can you imagine athletic director Pat Hobbs writing off on this?
Well, considering how much money he's getting from SHI International for the naming rights, yeah, actually I can. It's a 7-year deal that starts at $1.25 million and goes up $100K every year. It's nearly $10 million for the whole shooting match, and it's a big step. It's double what they were getting from High Point, who was paying them $600,000 a year. So yeah, you may be able to queue up an
Can we
insert.
come up with a new name?
Yeah. Or spell it out. Don't acronym or initial it. But SHI Stadium.
Stadium. How long is it until the good people in the Rutgers Athletic Department realize that it should be SHI International Corp Stadium?
Yeah.
just so that certain letter at the bottom of the alphabet isn't added when they are starting off 0 for 7, because it could be a
I would hate for them to be called the
a
SI team.
yes. Oh, I love these corporate naming rights.
That's pretty much all I've got this week. I mean, it's granted it's not an hour-long Newsapalooza, but it's a few odds and ends here on my end. You got anything that you want to hit on this week before we wrap things up?
Well, we talked about some of the takeaways from Media Day and what we thought, just some impressions that we got throughout it. And, we discussed about the meaningfulness of these events. But we are in the middle of talking season and fall camp is beginning. In fact, practice starts, I think, this week for Miami and Florida as they get ready for the August 24th game. So the college football debrief will be dropping a few podcasts from now up until the start of the season as we preview the conferences this year. We'll start off this week with a big picture show. Anthony Goldman and I kind of talk about whether the Clemson-Alabama rivalry part 4 or championship game part 4 is good for college football. If it happens. Because Notre Dame and Georgia are better. And we also will start our conference previews, beginning with the Big 12, and some really good, interesting topics there, especially when you look at the transfer portal and Austin Kendall going from Oklahoma to West Virginia and becoming immediately eligible. West Virginia head coach Neil Brown and Oklahoma head coach Lincoln Riley had some really good comments about that. We mentioned about Chris Kleiman and his impact at Kansas State, and Matt Wells and his impact at Texas Tech, and what he's got going on in Lubbock. So we'll be breaking down the Big 12, and we'll start doing the Power 5 leagues, the group of 5 leagues, as the weeks go by up until the start of the season. And I know you and I need to start meeting up on the trophy game show that we'll dust off and do again. And those are a couple of things you look for. We'll be doing that when the season begins.
Yeah, and folks, the season is inching ever so close. We're looking at about 4 weeks out, maybe 4 or 5 weeks out. As we record this today,
about a month.
We're like 33 days out, so just barely over a month from kickoff for the first game. And then we get to talk about game stuff here on the review. And I suppose with that, we should wrap things up. Thank you for tuning in, everybody. We appreciate the view or the listen, depending on whether you're watching us on YouTube or if you are listening to our podcasts on our various podcast hosts. This is the OSG Sports team. We are the online sports guys. We talk college football at least a couple times a week, every week here on the OSG Sports Podcasting Network. Don't forget, you can, if you want to find out more, get our phone apps. We have the look up OSG Sports on Google Play, look up OSG Sports on iTunes. You'll find us there. It's free. Download it. You'll get the updates, the latest, the greatest, all of our content in one handy-dandy little place as Brother Wilkie kind of shows you what it's all about. It's all about access and finding that content. Not only will you find our content, you'll find content from Soccer Down Here, our sister show in the SDH network. You'll find content from our friends up north in Canada at barnburner.ca, where they talk everything from basketball to hockey to wrestling and everything in between. And that's probably enough of the gratuitous promos because I'm running out of creative ways to couch them or lead into them. So with that being said, we will wrap things up. I am OSG Phil. He is Jay Wilkerson 16. Brother Wilkie, we bid you adieu. We say goodbye. Tune in again next week when we'll have more college football news, notes, and nuggets. And don't forget the debrief midweek coming up next. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Have a great week.
Over? Did you say over? Nothing is over until we decide it is. Was it over when the Germans bombed Pearl Harbor? Hell no!
German? Forget it, he's rolling.
It ain't over now.
Game over, man. Game over.